Have you ever wondered how a single decision can alter the destiny of millions of people? How 30 seconds can determine the direction of an entire franchise for decades? On that June 25th, 2009, the air inside the theater at Madison Square Garden was thick with expectation. You could sense that something special was about to happen. But nobody imagined that night would forever change the destiny of the New York Knicks. James Dolan, owner of the franchise for exactly 10 years, watched silently as his team prepared for what would be one of the most crucial decisions in basketball history. At 54 years old, Dolan already carried the weight of a decade of controversial choices, but nothing would prepare him for what was to come. The sound of heels echoed through the corridors as executives ran from one side to another. Phones rang incessantly. You could feel the tension growing with each passing minute, as if destiny itself was being written in that improvised war room. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention, Dolan thought, not knowing that these words would gain prophetic meaning in the coming hours. Coach Mike D'Antoni constantly pulled Dolan aside. His voice carried an urgency that cut through the air like a blade. James, we need Steph Curry. He's perfect for our system. It's exactly what Phoenix had with Steve Nash, but even better. But something bothered the front office. Curry came from Davidson, a small school. He was only 6 feet 3 inches tall. Will he be able to defend in the NBA? The scouts asked. He's just a college shooter, some executives whispered. Dolan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every decision he made affected not just an organization, but millions of passionate fans who had bled blue and orange for decades. How is it possible to carry so much weight without your hands trembling? At that exact moment, on the other side of the country, something extraordinary was happening. Del Curry, Steph's father, was making desperate phone calls. His voice, choked with emotion, echoed through the phone. "Don, do you have a problem if we select Steph at the 7th position?" he asked Don Nelson, coach of the Golden State Warriors. Del's response was like a punch to the stomach. "Yes, I have a problem. We want him in New York." Del Curry was literally begging the Warriors not to draft his own son. What's most impressive is that a father was willing to interfere with his son's destiny to see him fulfill the dream of playing at Madison Square Garden, the sacred temple of basketball. Meanwhile, in the Knicks' room, the pressure was mounting. D'Antoni had developed a brilliant plan: trade with Minnesota to move up to the 5th position and secure Curry before any other team could take him. It was a perfect plan. Almost perfect. "We don't need to do this," said one of the executives, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Curry will be available at the 8th position. Nobody will take him before us. It's guaranteed." Dolan felt that shiver down his spine that every leader knows when they're about to make a decision that will change everything. Naturally, this leads us to question: how many times in life do we have the opportunity to change history with a single choice? The noise from the main arena reached muffled into the room where they were. Thousands of fans waited anxiously. You could hear the collective murmur, like waves crashing against distant rocks. Each of those fans blindly trusted that the administration would make the right decision. "Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention," Dolan repeated to himself, not realizing he was about to discover the true weight of those words. At 8:15 p.m., Commissioner David Stern took the stage. His voice echoed through the arena like a decree of destiny. With the first pick of the 2009 draft, the Los Angeles Clippers select Blake Griffin from the University of Oklahoma. The tension was palpable. Each pick that passed brought the Knicks closer to their fateful decision. Second pick, Memphis. Third, Oklahoma City. Fourth, Sacramento. And then came the moment that would change everything. With the fifth pick of the draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Ricky Rubio. A collective sigh. Rubio came off the board. Curry was still available. With the sixth pick of the draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Johnny Flynn from Syracuse University. Another sigh. 2 point guards in sequence for Minnesota. Curry remained on the table. The Knicks executives looked at each other with that smile of those who have everything under control. You could feel confidence growing like a warm wave. But then, with the seventh pick of the draft, the Golden State Warriors select. Time stopped. The air became thin. Dolan felt his heart accelerate in a way he had never experienced before. Steph Curry, from Davidson College. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if all the air had been sucked from the room. Isn't it incredible how the world can collapse in a matter of seconds? D'Antoni turned pale, his eyes filled with that expression that only appears when we see our dreams shattering before us. No, no, this can't be happening, he murmured with a choked voice. Dolan felt something he had never felt before, the ice of realization running through his veins. Del Curry had begged, pleaded, for the Warriors not to take his son, but they did it anyway. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. And at that moment, Dolan realized that perhaps he should have paid more attention. Now it was the Knicks' turn. The eighth pick. The moment of truth. With the eighth pick of the draft, the New York Knicks select Jordan Hill from the University of Arizona. And that's how a dynasty was born. On the other side of the country. From the other side of the table, Dolan watched as Steph Curry shook hands with Commissioner David Stern, wearing the Golden State Warriors cap. That 21-year-old young man, with his shy smile and determined look, was about to revolutionize basketball. But not in New York. At that moment, while cameras captured Curry waving his hands in the air in celebration, Dolan couldn't imagine he had just witnessed the birth of the greatest dynasty of the last 20 years of the NBA. He also couldn't imagine that Jordan Hill would play only 24 games in a Knicks uniform before being traded. What nobody expected was that this single decision would haunt James Dolan for the rest of his life. As Curry headed to greet his family, radiant with happiness, Dolan felt the weight of something he couldn't yet fully comprehend. It was as if a shadow had settled in his soul, a feeling that something very important had slipped through his fingers. The night that should have been one of celebration had become the beginning of a torment that would last decades. And the worst of all? This was just the first of many nights when James Dolan would stay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what could have been. But what happened next would change everything forever. Have you ever tried to forget something that haunts you every day? How is it possible to live normally when every sports newscast is a direct stab to your heart? For James Dolan, the 5 years following the 2009 draft transformed into psychological torture that no money in the world could cure. Every Steph Curry game was a cruel reminder that a single decision had cost the Knicks decades of glory. The 2009-10 season began with false hopes. Jordan Hill, the Knicks' choice, showed glimpses of talent. Maybe we made the right choice, some whispered in the corridors of Madison Square Garden. But on the other side of the country, something extraordinary was beginning to flourish. Steph Curry, with his number 30, Warriors jersey, began to show glimpses of what was to come. They weren't spectacular numbers yet, but there was something different in the way he played. Something that deeply touched anyone who understood basketball. Dolan tried not to watch Warriors games. It was impossible not to feel that tightness in his chest every time Curry appeared on television. Like a ghost that refuses to leave, the image of the young point guard was always present, reminding him of what could have been. Great. Decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. But now Dolan realized that the whole world was paying attention to the player he had let slip away. And then came the devastating blow. February 2010. The Knicks traded Jordan Hill to Houston in just 24 games. 24 games! The man who had been chosen in place of Steph Curry couldn't even complete a season in New York. The irony was cruel as a sharp blade. While Hill packed his things to leave New York, Curry was conquering hearts and minds in Golden State, showing that Del Curry was right. His son was special. Dolan began to feel something he had never experienced before, pure and visceral regret. It was like carrying a stone in his chest that got heavier each day. How many times in life do we experience this kind of remorse that corrodes our soul from within? The 2010-11 season brought the first real stab. Curry exploded to 18.6 points per game, leading the Warriors in assists and showing a three-point shot that defied the laws of physics. Meanwhile, the Knicks continued in the mediocrity that had become their trademark. But it was in 2012 that Dolan had his first real existential crisis. Curry had become an undisputable star of the league, and the Warriors began to show signs that something special was being built. You could perceive that a dynasty was being born, exactly as D'Antoni had predicted. Dolan began to avoid front office meetings when the subject was talent development. Every conversation about scouting was a painful reminder of his monumental failure. If I had listened to Mike, he constantly thought. But life's what-ifs don't change the past. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. And now the entire NBA was paying attention to what the Warriors were building around Steph Curry. 2013 brought the definitive humiliation. On February 27th, Steph Curry entered Madison Square Garden as a visitor and destroyed the Knicks with 54 points. 54 points! In the sacred temple of basketball. In the house that should have been his house. Dolan was in the arena that night. He felt each three-pointer like a slap in the face. The New York crowd, known for booing their own players, was standing and ovating the opponent. You could feel the electrifying energy taking over Madison Square Garden. But not for the Knicks. At that moment, watching Curry raise his arms in celebration after each impossible shot, Dolan understood the total magnitude of his decision. It wasn't just about a lost player. It was about a culture, a dynasty, a revolution in basketball that could have happened in New York. The sports media didn't forgive. Dolan lost Curry, the headlines proclaimed. The Knicks, and the biggest what-if in NBA history. Each article was like salt on an open wound that refused to heal. What's most impressive is that Dolan, a man accustomed to controlling narratives through his media network, was completely powerless before this story. There was no spin, no excuse, no way to alter the facts. He had chosen wrong. 2014 marked the beginning of the championship era for Golden State. Curry had become the leader of a revolution that changed how basketball was played. The three-point shot, previously considered an occasional resource, had become the main weapon of an unstoppable war machine. Dolan watched those playoffs with a mixture of admiration and agony. How is it possible to admire something that should have been yours? It was like watching another man living the life you should have had. In every post-game interview, Curry demonstrated the humility and charisma that would have been perfect for New York. His magnetic personality, combined with his transcendent talent, would have made him the undisputed king of the greatest city in the world. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. But now the entire world paid attention to the empire Curry was building on the other side of the country. The sleepless nights began in 2015. Dolan stayed awake calculating alternative scenarios. If we had drafted Curry, would he have had the same coaches, the same system, the same opportunities? The questions multiplied like viruses, infecting every thought. But the cruelest truth was simple. With D'Antoni as coach, Curry would have flourished in New York, exactly as he flourished in Golden State. Maybe even more, considering the pressure and exposure of New York media. The Warriors' first title in 2015 was like receiving a terminal diagnosis. Dolan watched that celebration in Oakland, knowing it should have been happening in Times Square. Millions of Knicks fans should have been in the streets celebrating, not suffering through another lost season. At that moment, as Curry raised the championship trophy for the first time, Dolan felt something he had never felt before. The total understanding that some decisions haunt us forever. You could perceive that his life had been divided into two parts, before and after that fateful choice of 2009. And the worst of all? This was just the first of many celebrations he would be forced to watch from afar, knowing that each one of them could have been his. Nobody could imagine that moment would be the turning point. How does a man survive when he discovers that a single decision cost not just a title, but an entire dynasty? What words exist to describe the agony of watching your greatest opportunity transform into someone else's greatest conquest? For James Dolan, the period between 2015 and 2022 wasn't just about watching Steph Curry win. It was about confronting the devastating reality that he had lost the chance to forever change the destiny of one of the most iconic franchises in world sports. The Warriors' second title in 2017 arrived like a definitive death sentence. Dolan was in his office at Madison Square Garden when he watched Curry raise his second championship trophy. The silence in that room was deafening. A silence full of regrets that echoed like screams. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. And now Dolan realized that the entire entertainment industry was paying attention to the dynasty he had let slip through his fingers. But it wasn't just about the titles. It was about what Curry represented. A complete revolution in basketball. He had transformed the three-point shot from an occasional tool into a weapon of mass destruction. You could perceive that each Warriors game redefined the rules of what was possible in basketball. And with each game, Dolan felt the weight of an inescapable truth. That revolution could have happened in New York. Madison Square Garden could have been the epicenter of the greatest change in modern basketball. Instead, it was just a museum of lost opportunities. The nights became a private hell. Dolan developed a self-destructive routine, watching Curry highlights compulsively, like someone who can't stop picking at an open wound. Each impossible basket, each broken record, each celebration was a brutal reminder of his monumental failure. What's most impressive is that Dolan, a man who controlled media and entertainment empires, felt completely powerless before a decision made decades ago. There was no way to buy, negotiate, or manipulate the past. 2018 brought the Warriors' third title, and with it, a disturbing revelation for Dolan. During the celebration, cameras captured Curry holding the trophy with tears in his eyes, whispering, "This is the third. How many more can we get?" 3 titles. 3 trophies that should have been in New York. 3 celebrations that Knicks fans should have experienced. The mathematics of regret was simple and brutal. Dolan began to develop what can only be described as a sickly obsession. He hired private analysts to calculate how many titles the Knicks would have won with Curry. The projections were devastating. With D'Antoni's system and New York pressure, Curry could have been even better. How many times in life do we have the chance to change the history of world sports? He constantly asked himself. The answer was obvious. Once, and he had wasted that chance. The psychological pressure began to affect other areas of his life. Close friends reported that Dolan had become obsessive, mentioning Curry in practically every conversation. It was as if that young man from Davidson had become the ghost that haunted every corner of his existence. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. But now, Dolan paid obsessive attention to everything related to Curry. He knew his statistics by heart, watched every interview, analyzed every movement. It was a form of self-imposed torture. The darkest moment came during the 2021 All-Star Game, held in Atlanta. Curry broke the record for three-pointers in a single All-Star Game, making 16 of 27 attempts. Madison Square Garden should have been the stage for that historic moment. But instead, Dolan watched from his mansion in Long Island, alone with his demons. That night, something broke inside James Dolan. It wasn't just the realization that he had lost Curry. It was the understanding that he had lost an entire era, an era that could have redefined not just the Knicks, but all of New York City. The statistics were like mathematical torture. Curry had become the greatest three-point shooter in NBA history. His 2,977 converted shots, at the time, were more than records. They were monuments to the greatness that New York had rejected. But then came 2021, and with it, the moment that almost completely destroyed Dolan. Steph Curry, at 33 years old, had his best statistical season of his career. 32 points per game, leader in three-pointers, in a season that proved his greatness had no expiration date. It was impossible not to feel that each record broken by Curry was a slap in Dolan's face. Each sports headline was a reminder that the Knicks had chosen mediocrity when greatness was literally within reach of their hands. Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention. And Dolan finally understood that his decision in 2009 had been observed by destiny itself, which now collected the price of his failure. And then came 2022, the year that would forever seal James Dolan's legacy of pain. Steph Curry won his 4th NBA title and, for the first time, was elected Finals MVP. At 34 years old, he had proven he was not just a great shooter, but a championship leader under maximum pressure. 4 titles. 4 dynasties that should have happened in New York. 4 moments of eternal glory that Knicks fans would never experience because of a single decision made on a June night in 2009. Dolan watched that final Warriors celebration with a mixture of admiration and absolute despair. Curry raising the trophy, kissing it, crying with joy. All of this should have been happening at Madison Square Garden, with millions of New Yorkers in the streets celebrating. At that moment, Dolan understood a truth that would accompany him forever. Some regrets have no cure. Some ghosts never abandon us. Some decisions define us for all eternity. Steph Curry had become more than a basketball player. He had become the living symbol of James Dolan's greatest mistake. And the worst of all, Curry was still at the peak of his career, promising more years of greatness, more years of painful reminders of what could have been. How is it possible to live with the weight of knowing you had the chance to change history and wasted it? Dolan was about to discover that this is a question without a satisfactory answer. And it was then that the truth finally came to light. How does a 69-year-old man find peace with a decision that has haunted him for 15 years? Is there redemption for those who had history in their hands and let it slip through their fingers? In 2024, James Dolan finally decided to break his silence. 15 years after that fateful June night of 2009, he was ready to talk about the regret that had shaped every day of his life since then. The interview took place at Madison Square Garden itself, in the office that had been the stage for so many controversial decisions. At 69 years old, Dolan seemed to carry the weight of every wrong choice in his tired expressions. You could perceive that this man had aged much more than the 15 years that separated that moment from the draft night. "You want to know about Steph Curry?" said Dolan, his voice carrying a melancholy that cut through the air like a blade. "Not a day goes by, not a single day, without me thinking about what could have been. And I'm not exaggerating. Literally, every day." The weight of those words echoed through the room like a confession that had been kept for decades. How many times in life does a man publicly admit the mistake that defines his existence? Dolan looked through the window that gave a view of the city he had disappointed for so long. Steph Curry could have worn our jersey. Madison Square Garden could have seen a dynasty. New York could have been the epicenter of the modern basketball revolution. 4 titles. 4 titles that should be here. The mathematics of regret was simple and devastating. While Curry conquered 4 championships with the Warriors, the Knicks continued being a national joke. The franchise that hadn't won a title since 1973 had wasted its best chance in decades. "Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention," Dolan murmured, repeating the words that had become his mantra of torment. "But maybe the truth is that I wasn't paying enough attention." The most painful confession came when he admitted the personal impact of the decision. "This destroyed relationships, destroyed nights of sleep, destroyed my peace of mind. You can't imagine what it's like to watch someone you could have chosen becoming the greatest of all time, knowing he wanted to be here." What's most impressive is that Dolan, a man known for rarely admitting mistakes, was completely vulnerable at that moment. Decades of corporate arrogance had been replaced by the brutal humility of someone who confronted their limitations. He revealed details that had never been public: the sleepless nights, the therapy sessions, the moments when he considered selling the franchise just to escape the constant reminder of his monumental failure. "Mike D'Antoni begged me," continued Dolan, his voice choked. "He knew. He saw in Curry exactly what he was looking for. But we thought we knew better. We thought Jordan Hill was the safer choice." The irony was cutting. Hill had played only 24 games for the Knicks before being traded, while Curry was rewriting the record books and redefining what it meant to be a superstar. Dolan then made a confession that revealed the depth of his obsession. "I know his statistics by heart. All the records, all the titles, all the moments of glory. I study every game as if it were work. It's a form of torture I chose for myself. 3,747 three-pointers in the regular season. 4 NBA titles. 2 regular season MVPs. 1 finals MVP. Each number was like a scar on Dolan's soul. But then came the most shocking revelation. If I could go back in time, I would change everything. I would sell my soul if necessary. But that's the problem with true regret. You have to live with it forever." It was impossible not to feel the devastating sincerity in those words. Dolan wasn't performing for the cameras. He was bleeding publicly, displaying wounds that never healed. "You want to know what the worst part is?" he continued, his eyes watery. "Curry was still available when our turn came. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was pure incompetence on our part. The opportunity was there, waiting, and we threw it away." Naturally, this leads us to question: how many of us carry regrets that define us? How many decisions do we make that echo through decades of consequences? Dolan spoke about how he tried to find peace through therapy, meditation, even music, his personal passion. "I write songs about regret now," he admitted with a bitter smile. "It's the only way I've found to process the pain." But the most powerful confession came at the end. "I learned that some mistakes are too big to be corrected. Some ghosts never abandon us. Steph Curry will forever be the reminder that I had the chance to change history and wasted it." The tears finally came when he spoke about the fans. Millions of people who have been rooting for the Knicks for decades, who deserve a title, who deserve glory. And I deprived them of that because of a 30-second decision. "Great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention," he repeated for the last time, but now with a different meaning. The problem is that some decisions are so important that we should pay attention to everything. And I didn't. When asked if he had found any form of peace, Dolan was brutally honest. Total peace? No. But maybe acceptance. Maybe the understanding that some lessons can only be learned through pain. He concluded with words that summarized 15 years of torment. Steph Curry isn't just a great basketball player. He's living proof that a single decision can alter the course of millions of lives. He's my greatest regret, but also my greatest lesson. The interview ended with Dolan looking again through the window, watching New York stretch before him. You could perceive that this man had found not peace, but something perhaps more valuable: the courage to publicly confront his failures. How do you measure the weight of a life defined by a single mistake? How do you quantify the regret of having wasted the chance to make history? For James Dolan, these questions have no answers. They only have consequences that echo through every day, every game, every moment when Steph Curry appears in the spotlight, forever reminding him of what could have been. And perhaps that's the true lesson of his story. Some decisions haunt us forever. Some opportunities, once lost, never return. Some regrets become part of our identity, shaping every day we have left. James Dolan learned this in the most painful way possible. And now, at 69 years old, he will have to live with this knowledge until the end of his days, knowing that Steph Curry, the man who could have been the IDD savior of the Knicks, will continue to be forever the ghost that haunts his soul. Because great decisions are made when nobody is paying attention, but the consequences, those last forever.